The Fletchcast. It's genetics.
Welcome to the Fletchcast. I'm Michael Fletcher, and club members, welcome. Today, one thing we're going to talk about, and I guess I shouldn't brag about this, but I will. I really do have a pretty incredible group of friends and people that I know, associates and things like that. And those people I've kind of collected in my whole life. I'm riveted by people, particularly people who have real stories. And we haven't talked about this on this podcast, but I am a hugely religious person in the context of I'm just thankful beyond belief for all the crazy stuff God does for us. And it's ironic, I think, that in many ways people have just missed that. They don't get it. They don't understand it. And one of the reasons I think they don't get it and they don't understand it is they haven't talked to people who get it and understand it and can walk you through it and can explain it to you. And that's important. I really do think religion has, it's moved away from people and it's not available to people. And ironically, or luckily, or through divine intervention, I've been lucky because I've had our guest today is Bishop Mark Tolbert, has been a part of my life for 20 years. And Bishop Tolbert is, he's everything. I mean, he's on the board of police commissioners in Kansas City. He is going to be the Bishop of the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World, which is, I think, the 5th largest African-American church in America. Bishop Tolbert is a self-made man, wealth-wise, which I love. He also, he just is real, and he talks to you honestly, and he'll occasionally laugh at a really bad joke. And so one thing I wanted to have Bishop Tolbert on today about is, and Bishop will tell you, I'll call him 8,000 times a day, and 7,980 of those will be meaningless, but sometimes they'll actually mean something. And probably 3 weeks ago, I called Bishop and I said, "Hey, Bishop, where are the people that God is talking to now?" Because and again, I'm not preaching to people, and your walk with God is whatever it is. With me, it's important, and I think we should be inclusive. But it just hit me. Where are these people? If God is with us every day, and I think He is, and you can define God how you want to view Him. But I have zero doubt that God is there and He's with us. But I was like, where are these people? Where are these people that can tell us that? And I called Bishop, and as you'll see, he always has a pretty good answer, and he doesn't preach. He doesn't dictate to you. He explains it to you. And it was really insightful. One other thing, a couple more things about Bishop I should tell you because they're important. I knew Bishop 20 years ago during the crack epidemic, and I met him at his church. And this is when they literally had senior daycare, and then you had to have daycare for the kids. It was horrible. And ever since that time, I've talked to Mark forever. I also represented Mark and his beautiful wife, Imelda, concerning the death of his son, Mark. Was it December 22nd he died, Bishop?
Yeah.
And this is because I'm a selfish piece of crap. This is why Mark's death impacted me in many ways. I mean, my family is, we didn't have a whole lot of anything. And so I didn't know about great things that happened to cool people and stuff. I hadn't seen it. And I didn't know a lot of religious people. When I met Bishop Tolbert and his wife, he really was it was a dream to me. I mean, it was an honest, religious, meaningful person who you could feel it and see it. And when I heard about his son dying, it just fucked me up. I was like, wait a minute. God, and this was early with my walk with God and learning what it means. And it doesn't just mean everything's going to be great, but I didn't know that. And so it really bothered me. And one of the first times that, I just had complete admiration for Bishop Tolbert, but also admiration for what he knows, is I said, Bishop, how? I mean, it bothered. I said, how do you do this? How do you continue to move forward? And Bishop Tolbert said that if I treated the death of my son differently than I've treated the death of all my other parishioners, then I would be a hypocrite. And I'm not a hypocrite. And I was like, that's fucking good. I mean, and it was just amazing because it's that this is religion. That God reaches out. I mean, he's here to help us. He's here to get us through things. And when you can talk to someone about the death of their son and have him make it make sense, that's how great religion is. And one other quick short story, and then we're going to get into this and just talk. I've tried bunches of cases and I've won. And we'll get into all of the legal things because we're going to do a bunch of legal stuff on this show. But one of the most important cases I ever tried was a case. Her name was Teresa Norris, and she was a Caucasian woman who was at a church in Springfield, Missouri, and her pastor raped her. He didn't just rape her; he raped her and he sodomized her, and it was in the church. And again, this was just one of those things of, well, how can this be? And she asked, would we help her? Well, I'm not white, and I really did not want to go to Springfield, Missouri. And but she said to me, she said, "Can I tell you something?" And this makes makes me tear up every time. She said, "When this happened, I felt like I couldn't turn to Jesus," and it was profound. It was. Can you imagine the worst thing ever, and you couldn't turn to Jesus? And it was. And again, it's not a religious thing. It's an empathy and a care thing. And it was one of those things about how important religion is and so with that long lead in, I bring you my friend Bishop Mark Tolbert. Hello, Bishop.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Do you remember that Teresa Norris case? Do you remember, because there was another time you said, hey, I can pastor with her. Do you remember this?
Mike, I've gone through so many things. And you've dealt with so many cases. I vaguely remember that case, but when you start talking about it, I was like,
Oh
man.
man,
Yeah.
it is that, would that be the worst?
Uh, I've seen some really bad cases, so that's probably in the middle.
From the okay, now I'm going to kill myself. No, but from the perspective of a person's individual journey, would that be the worst? That if that person said, I don't believe I can turn to God, from an individual perspective?
Well, the challenge, I think, for people in general is to not put their trust, their faith, their hope in people, in organizations. And so, being a pastor for over 31 years, I've often said to people, if I bust hell wide open, that doesn't mean you will, because you have to have a relationship with God for yourself, that even if I'm going astray, something guides you in the right direction. So my challenge for Christians and people all over the world is have a talk with him for yourself, because he'll talk back to you.
But what if she, like in Teresa's case, what if she said, this was so personal to me, I don't feel like I could? And she had a music ministry. I mean, she was a down sister. I mean, she was like, I believed it. In fact, this is another Bishop Tolbert kind of story, but we were at trial, and I'll never forget it. And it was against the Methodist church. And so Teresa's there by herself with her husband. And so the church, they would line up pastors on the front row of the courtroom watching it. And I was like, these people are trying to intimidate her. Yeah. And we had this bishop we had a bishop from that church, not your church, on the stand. And I said to her, I said, by the way, Bishop, isn't there a segment of the Bible that says, those of you who preach in my name, I'm going to hold you to a different standard? She says, I'm not sure. I said, well, could you check in your Bible? and Bishop, this is why God is great, because he also has a great sense of humor. She says, I don't have my Bible with me. And I said, well, maybe some of the people here, and everyone turns and looks at all the pastors lined up on the front. And as God, it gives me goose. God is my witness. Teresa Norris is sitting at the table, reaches down and says, I got my Bible.
Oh,
I
wow.
have my Bible. I was like, there you go. I mean, it was, she was incredible. But what was weird about that, it, it seemed like she lost God. I mean,
Yeah.
what does that? I mean, how do you deal with that if you're a person and what do you do? How, how do you recognize that? How do you, I guess, maybe make sure that doesn't happen? How do you see it coming?
Well, again, I go back to faith has to be in God and God's ability to guide you individually. And so, as I've said to the people who attend Victorious Life Church in Kansas City, Missouri,
Great church.
thank you. You have to know God for yourself because there are things that He will say to you, even though you get involved in a situation. He will talk to you and say, hey, I know you're in this, but I know how to guide you out of it. And so what happens is sometimes, unfortunately, the person who is speaking, the preacher, the pastor, they're they're sometimes guiding people to them when they should be pushing people to God.
Ah, I get that. That's interesting, by the way. And again, I've known you a long time, never heard it explained that. But this is another example where you make it make sense because that to me is like, oh, well, that really is it because it's God who matters, not this pastor. But by the way, this goes back to my you got a call because I know lots and lots of pastors that it's about them.
Yeah.
You know, it's it's it, it's sad, but the other part of it that bothers me is that I mean I've had a rough life. I mean I've gone through lots of stuff, and I've always just kind of felt, man, it's okay. I mean, in fact, I've kind of known it's okay, and it's just because it was just I just you kind of know God. It's like, man, I got you. You know, yeah, it's gonna suck, but I got you.
Yeah.
And it's I look at when you look out there today and you see, for example, post election, and I don't want to have a bunch of empathy for Caucasians, but I do because I'm half white. But one of the things I see is that a lot of these Trump supporters, they're just afraid, aren't they, Bishop? They're afraid, and it's you don't have to be afraid, you
Well,
know.
Mike, that's because that's how the president governed, was out of fear. Oh, they're going to come to your suburbs. They're going to do this.
Right,
They're going
right.
to. So interesting that you would make this analogy because I was just talking to someone yesterday about why the church is so different now than what it was yesterday. I grew up in an era where they said, if you sin, if you do this, if you drink, if you curse, if you commit adultery, if you do this, you're going to go to hell. If you don't come to Bible study, you're going to go to hell. If you don't show up to church every time the door is open, you're going to go to hell. Well, so it was a motivation of fear. So now you say to people, you don't do this, you're going to hell. And they look at you and say, I'm living in hell anyway.
Wow, wow.
And so I'm not motivated by the fear of hell because the way I'm feeling, I don't know if hell could be
Right,
any
right,
worse than what I'm
right.
living. And so that's why you can never long term motivate anyone from fear. But the reason I've been married for 42 years,
Is fair.
and the reason,
Is fair.
and the reason my mother and father were married for 60 years is because we love each other. We found out that love covers a multitude of faults. And uh, love is so deep and so powerful that it does more than fear can do. Because eventually, when you stop being scared, you say, eh, but you can't really just discord love
Now,
because love will keep you up at night.
love is. See, I'd make a joke, but you're a bishop, so I can't. But we're thinking it. The way you explained that, that is also similar to faith. Faith is if you have faith and you have love. And here's another thing is, and again, it's enlightening to me, is because I've never really heard you threaten people. I've never heard you say you're going to hell, you're going to do this. And again, it's more of that. It's kind of like when we talk, where you say, well, here's this and here's that, and you can kind of make up your mind, and then you give that look, and it's like, okay, it's this one, right? Right. Okay, got it. That's that one. But that's that part of religion that I think so many people miss today, which is, man, God's not here to give you a quiz that if you miss it, you lose. God really is. I remember, I shouldn't say, well, my daughter's not here, so I will. I may or may not have snorted a lot of cocaine in my days. And I remember one night, and it was the first time I ever read the Bible through and through. And I remember it as New Testament. I remember closing it going, shit, it's just, but no, it's absolute truth. I said, it's just love. It's just love. That's all in the New Testament. It's just love. God just says, love each other. I mean, is that fair? Because that was a profound moment for me, because I just, man, I remember two things. I said, God wants you to do two things. He wants you to listen, and he wants you to love. And I thought, man, well, that's, even I can probably do that. But it is about love for in the New Testament. I'm not an Old Testament guy, but isn't it?
Well, but you can't get to the New Testament until you go through the Old Testament.
You've hit me with that like 8,000 times, by the way. I'm like,
because the first thing you got to understand is God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. So God said, I created this world, these people. I have a process. So I don't know if you've ever read in the Bible or saw where Lucifer, who was created to be the head worshiper, he looked around and says, where's God? Because Lucifer has never seen God. The Bible says no man has ever seen God at any time, because God is a spirit, and because even Lucifer, who was in heaven, said, and I don't see God, I'm going to take over heaven. And the moment he said he's going to take over, God said, no, you're not. Boom. Dispatched him out of heaven. The Bible says like lightning. So now the world is corrupted by sin based upon Lucifer's disdain for who God is, because he hadn't seen him. That's why faith is so important, because you can't see it, but you have to believe it.
but isn't that though part of the, well, and I agree, but it's the believing it part that I think people don't understand. They think that the believing it part is subject to, some test. I mean, didn't Jesus die for our sins? And if that's the case, and I believe it is, doesn't that allow us? Here's how I view it. Jesus said, it's done. It's over. I've done this for you. I love you. Can I do it that way?
But here's what I was getting to, Mike, is that God made himself a body. So God is the soul of Jesus. That's why Jesus was a man born through the virgin birth of Mary. But even though his stature looked like you and I, his soul was.
Oh, for the record, God had blonde hair and blue eyes, sir. Jesus did. He did. I love that. I'm like, this is the only African dude who has blue eyes and blonde hair. It's weird.
So Mike, Jesus is hanging on the cross. They stabbed him in the side. They nailed him, but he won't die. But when he's getting ready to die, he looks up And if you look at this in the Bible,
It's
he
my
says,
favorite. It's my favorite thing, Bishop.
Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? So now the soul of Jesus, who is God, you can't kill a soul, you can't kill God, leaves the body of Jesus, and now the corpse of Jesus hangs there on the cross. Jesus said, you can't kill me, because they didn't know that he was God manifested in the flesh.
What else he also said, which is my favorite part, and I mean, I just love the whole, I mean, it's amazing to me because I know it happened. I don't care what anyone says. It did. And historically speaking, it's very clear that there was a Jesus and there was this. But the part that I take to heart is when he says, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. I
Absolutely.
mean, that's a level of extraordinary. And he meant it. He meant it, Bishop. He just.
Oh, absolutely.
But you say that, but what people don't understand is that this is when on earth, when you're on earth, here's what God does. He's done this for you. He's done it for us. And by the way, I love it when Jesus is like, hey, by the way, Dad, this sucks. You know what I mean? He really does. He's like, and it's what we all do. It's where for me, it's like, I've been like, God, and we've all been, God, I've been a good servant. I've taken, and Bishop, I've done a lot of stuff to help in the right thing. And there are times where it's like, this is going to be a bit much, God. I mean, and when you look and see what Jesus said, the same thing, God's Son on earth said the same thing. So that's one part about, the New Testament it's like it's us. It's something you can look at every day and say, I've been there. I mean, I've been there where it's like, he says, why have you forsaken me? I mean, that's powerful. That to me is one of.
But it all hinges on love and faith. And when you understand that for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but shall have everlasting life. The hinge word is believeth. In this journey, you have to believe despite all of the stuff that happens to you that tries to knock your belief out of your very body.
And obviously that's true. The part that means most to me though is that you can see Jesus struggling, and you could see him say, why have you forsaken me? That is something that every person, they can put it in their lives, and they could say, you know what? God didn't stop loving Jesus. It's part of the process, but that human, that realistic, everyday, this is part of all of our life. Why? Why did Bishop Tolbert's son die 3 days before Christmas? Why? Why has that happened? You have to ask yourself that. And that to me is why it's so powerful when Jesus, I mean, for it to be in the Bible, for that to be significant enough. So when was Mark written? 44 years after his death. For that to be significant enough for them to say, and by the way, and then Jesus said, why have you forsaken me? That just, to me, it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful, amazing, this is what religion is. It's everyday life. And by the way, God still loves you. Still loves you.
And see, Mike, the challenge for a lot of people is to make the separation, even though, as Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I and my Father are one. But in his flesh, he was all man. But in his soul, he was all God. But you and I have a soul. And I wrote a book called Naked Soul because I wanted people...
I watched a porno called Naked Soul, so maybe it's the same. Probably not an adaptation there, right? There.
So I wanted people to understand that every soul has to have a body to get into, to live out its process, to see, do you go to hell or do you go to heaven?
Bishop, on that topic, let me ask you this. So this is one of the, I just, I'm utterly convinced that one is that there is evil in this world. And, but the other part that gets me is how many people are complicit with it. I mean, it's one of my favorite things is that how people treat, one of the proudest days of my life, my oldest daughter, she was doing this journal. And this one we lived in Kansas City. And in their journal, she says, my dad is this, and my dad knows all the homeless people. And it was because I would, and it goes back to this Jesus, hey, how you treat that person is how you treat me. But it's also just, it's a kindness thing. And it's also, I have deep feelings about, when people are talking about poor people or criminal people. We had a foster kid, and he couldn't read. He was 13, couldn't read. And I remember saying to people, you have no idea what that kid has been through, or the homeless person. You have no idea what they've been through. And so we just have to care more. But the other thing is there are times where it's not just caring. It's, and I'm Catholic. I'm not anymore, but I remember we had a case, and it was in Catholic church, and they were raping children. And I mean, it wasn't even, and they had a camp in St. Louis, Missouri, and one of our clients was there being raped at summer camp, called his dad, please, please, please come get me. Dad drives all the way up, working class family, goes, what's the problem? And of course, all the priests are there, and he's just sitting there, he says nothing. Dad leaves him horribly raped for the rest of the week. This evil, why do you think so many people go along with that? Just evil. That's evil. Why is that?
Mike, the challenging thing is that most people like to look at their brother or sister and think the best. And so, it's hard for a person to think that somebody would do this, and I'll give you something that's not as horrific as what you were talking about with the boy being raped. In our charter school, which has been going on since 1999, we've actually graduated over 10,000 children.
But what else have you done for kids? Is that it? That's just it.
K through 8.
Kansas City School District as a whole hasn't graduated 10,000 kids ever. So, ever.
We had this little guy in the 4th grade. He was coming in, and as soon as he would eat breakfast, he would go in the classroom, and he'd put his head on the desk and go to sleep. And the teacher was just irritated. So finally, she brings him to the office. He can't be in my class. He can't pay attention. Da, 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 da. So, long story short, we have a conversation with the little fella, and he says, "Well, I do this because I didn't get to eat dinner. So that's the first meal I've had, and then you know how brothers do.
Right.
We eat and we go to sleep." So we said, "Well, why didn't you eat dinner?" "Well, I'm living with my grandmother, and my grandmother said my mom didn't give her any money or any food stamps, so she won't let me eat dinner with the rest of the kids." So anyway, we do a care package. We send it home. We tell him, when they eat dinner, you eat this, And then, of course, we call the mother up and say, "Hey, look, we will call Division of Family Services."
Bishop almost cussed. Yes. Hey.
So bottom line is that somewhere along the line, somebody has to have empathy to ask the right questions. Not, why are you sleeping in my class? Let's get to the bottom of it. And most people don't want to know because they feel helpless not to be able to do something about it. And of course, I don't have that problem of feeling helpless. I'm going to the bottom if I got to put on the gloves and get in the ring with Mike Tyson.
But but Bishop, and by the way, that's true for many ways. Bishop is also on the board of police commissioners in Kansas City, and there's police violence, and Bishop routinely says, this is racism, but again, you're the exception, because there have been people on that board where you're like, oh, it looks fine to me. How can it look fine to you? They're beating people. Your ability or willingness to step in is, it's not common.
I'm gonna show you something, Mike. And it's amazing that you mentioned that. So most people who've been on that board have either had a job or something like that. Well, I got this letter from the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, and it says, on July 13, 2020, I received a complaint alleging that you violated the department's discrimination and harassment policy. So
that you did?
Yeah.
I knew it.
So the problem is,
there you go. Right.
So the problem is, I don't have a boss for them to go to and tell me, stop talking so much.
Wow.
So I took this letter back down to the board attorney, and I said, if you ever send me any more, whoa, Mike, you almost made me do that again.
Well, what I love is one of the first. I'm positive one of the only attorneys who's ever tried a civil case of police brutality to a jury and won. And it's funny that they're willing to investigate a letter about you discriminating, which I'm sure you have every day. But if they shoot this guy with Timothy Wilson, they shot a 13-year-old African-American kid, it was just, you just murdered the kid. But right. It's funny they're willing to look at that. But back to this issue of evil.
Let me. So it says, in particular, the complaint alleged discrimination based on race, in that on July 7, 2020, you were alleged to have said, no offense to women, but especially white women are not minorities. But anyway, wow. So I'm going to put this letter up. And
wow. Well, that's fabulous, by the way. I mean, it really is.
That when Imelda and I lost our son, Marky, you were the only attorney that we could get to sue the city on our behalf. And of course, it took many years, and you won the suit. And I said to some of the people, if you bring my son back that a fire truck hit and killed on incident impact, I'll double this money and give it back to you.
The other part of that is that and I knew a bunch of fire guys and nice guys, and this was just the problem with a fire truck is they're really hard to stop. But this was one where you remember that everyone had said it was because Mark ran a red light. It was Mark's fault. Right. Mark's fault, because we know it was Mark's fault because there's what's called an optiscan. And that optiscan, when a fire truck is coming and the sirens are on, the lights on, it automatically changes. And that's what happened. It's Mark's fault. We sent our accident reconstruction out there. Steve McKenzie, and he says, I'm positive that's not how it happened. Why? Because there's no optiscan there. And it was like, oh, so they were just lying. And that was the part where it was galling in the sense of, man, first of all, you killed a young kid 3 days before, and then you lied about it. But to their credit, Louis Wright, who was the head of the firefighters, he stepped up and said, yeah, let's get this done. It's just weird how life works, isn't it, Bishop? Because that's something that is so profound in my life, even now. It's funny. I'm going to tell this long story, but it's great. And it was Callista, my youngest daughter's birthday, a year and a half ago. It was 13 months ago. And I've been talking about this so much, I didn't know it was another year. We were driving down the street where I live. And as we were driving, Callista is asking about something. And we're at this stoplight on Orange Street. And she said, well, how do the lights change or something like that? Oh, no, I was talking to Bishop Tolbert. And she said, how do you know Bishop Tolbert? And I said, well, we did politics, but I also represented his family when his son got killed. And she said, how? And we're sitting at an intersection of 4th and Orange. And I said, well, you see that light up there? I said, that thing on top, it's called an optiscan. And Mark was driving, and the fire truck came and hit him and killed him. And they said that there was an Optiscan and it was Mark's fault, but it turned out there wasn't an Optiscan. And she goes, wow. And so it was their fault, right? And they said it was his problem. Oh, okay. That's my daughter's birthday is October 22nd. That's the night of October 21st. So we're and at the corner talking about an Optiscan. I'm driving. We get home the next day. Gives me goosebumps again. Next day, I'm driving her to school, and it was for you parents out there. There are times where it's like you better get your ass to school because you're going to get beaten. And this was one of those days. I'm driving her, and as I'm driving, we're coming to the same intersection, Orange and 4th, and I'm driving, and it's my daughter's birthday. It would have been her 11th birthday, and I'm driving, and I know why I looked up, and I just slowed down and looked. We had the green light, and I looked, and this woman goes through the intersection in a gray Suburban, 50 miles an hour at least, and I slam on the brakes. And it's not funny, but I look over, but there's a lady in the corner, and she's like, and I stopped, and I remember thinking, holy God. I mean, it would have killed my daughter, not just killed her, it would have killed her on my birthday in front of me, except for the fact, for whatever reason, I get here at the corner 12 hours before we're talking about an Optiscan, and we're driving. And as we're driving, I said, that is, and again, I just believe in God. I said, that is God. 12 hours before we're having this conversation about Optiscan. And I said, I'm going to call Bishop and Imelda and say, Mark saved my daughter's life. And I said, I don't know. I don't want to make it feel like their son's death is bad for, it is good for my kid, which is stupid, of course. And I was, struggling with it all day. And then I had taken Callista to soccer, and I'm going to pick her up, and I get to this intersection, and I got to stop, and this fire truck goes by, right by, and there's a wreck at that intersection. And I said, I think this is God telling me I could go ahead and call Bishop Tolbert and tell him this. And it was, I don't care what anybody says. It saved my daughter's life. And it was this incredible thing. And then I talked to Melda, who actually got this better than Mark did. She says it's angels. She says God sends angels to protect you. And it was just one of those things where you're like, that is so cool. And I don't care what you tell me how that worked out when it wasn't divinely set into place. I mean, it's just an incredible. And it was funny is it was her birthday a month ago. And I said, man, God, I've been obsessing on that story for 13 months now, but it was so profound. I mean, it was just literally, I mean, most normal people don't drive down the street and go, you know what, I'm just going to slow down at this intersection that I was talking about last night. And I mean, Bishop, it would have been losing a child can only be worse if you're, and of course I'm on this side and she's on that side. So I probably would have lived. It would have been this horrific thing that Mark and God prevented from happening.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy though. I mean, it's just, wow. I mean, it's crazy. There's a couple other things I want to talk to you about. One is this, and I think God's crazy and he's funny. I also think God's funny. And I mean, but he is, and he's got a sense of humor. And I have this line that I have this rule with Bishop Tolbert and Bishop Sandra Weaver where I say, I get a cuss in my office, you not in your office. But I got this saying because it's one of my favorite lines. It says, they say God works in mysterious ways, and then I say, and sometimes that motherfucker's very direct, because there are, and there's just times where it's this God going, look here, you idiot, let me pull you out because you're this stupid, and I just call them God stories. And I have, and we had our good friend Zach Miller, who's Jewish, on a couple weeks ago, and he does this joke about he did the most non-Jewish thing ever, which got a tattoo on his arm, and so I think it's probably the most non-religious thing you should do. But I love God stories, and I have two of the greatest God stories, and I want to and then I want to talk to Bishop about his. But one of my favorite God stories was there was a period of time where this was 8 or 9 years ago where they were killing Christians in Darfur, and they really were. And it was really kind of messed up. They were just killing them. You got to give the African brothers credit. They're like, let's just go kill all of them. And so they killed hundreds of thousands. And this is how extreme it was. My ex-wife said, this is wrong. I'm like, what? And you think that's wrong? And so she said, we should do something about it. And I said, okay. And so we had some money, and I said, let's try to give 50% of our money to charity for a couple of years. And so we had 24, I remember we had decided we're going to give $24,000. We had like 30,000. That's more coming in. And it's like, we're going to give this to Darfur. And I said, okay, no worries. Cool. Blah, blah, sent the check. The next day, Bishop, I'm in the shower and I hear this crying. Oh, what? But I look up and I go, what's wrong? And she's like, I was wrong. We only had $24,000. We don't have any more money. She says, I'll cancel the check. And I said, don't worry about it. God will take care of it. And as God is my witness, it may have been 12 hours later, I get this email from my old partner and he says, hey, I got this money. It's $50,000. Where do you want it?
Wow.
That's a good one. I mean, it was just one of those things where it's just like, who knew?
That's incredible.
The other one is that this is, and good. And I love the money part, but I also like the part where God saves my life. I was in college with my friend Perry Dummett, who was one of my favorite friends in the world because he could pick up chicks by singing. Bishop, he would do this. I'm not joking. We would be hanging out at his condo and he'd reach and get his guitar. I was like, oh, here we go. And he'd pull it out and he'd start singing. I was like, here, and it worked. He also, his roommate was never home, so he could smoke dope there all the day too. And so we'd get high before practice, which is why we were great baseball players. And I remember that I'd leave and there's a car facing, like my car's facing this way. And I had to go back that way. And I got in my car and I started and it just turned and died in the middle of the road. And as I look up, there's a trash truck coming. And Bishop, I'm looking at the driver in the eyes and he's like, and it goes up. It's right there. It goes round, straight down the road. And I'm sitting there. It's physically impossible.
Yeah.
Physically impossible.
Wow.
That's a good God story.
Yeah.
That's a good, Bishop, he's looking at me. He's like, you're dead, dude. You're finished. That's why you shouldn't smoke dope. It's God saying,
Well, Mike, I was in San Bernardino, California, and we had to fly into there. I can't remember what city I was going to speak in. And this has been 12 or 14 years ago. But I'm in the hotel, it's raining. Front desk calls me and says, Mr. Tolbert, there's a guy down here, and he asked for you by name. And, we're not going to give him your room number, but do you want to talk to him? And I said, well, yeah, I guess. They said, well, you want us to give him a phone? I said, no, I'll come down. So I had my musician with me, Elder Chris Collier. And so I call him up and I say, hey, man, there's some guy downstairs who's asked for me by name. You probably ought to go down with me. Mike, as God be my witness, we went down. He was a scruffy looking guy. And so, we asked him, well, are you hungry? Took him, got him something to eat. He's sitting in the front seat because I needed to keep an eye on him. And Chris Carr is sitting in the back. And this guy starts reading me my life. And
this is a good one, Bishop.
Yeah. And
this is a good one.
Then he turns and starts telling Chris Collier, he says, this man is going to be, a very beneficial part of your life. You need to stick with him and so forth and so on.
What year was this?
Oh man, this had to be in I want to say 2000 maybe.
Wow.
And so, Chris and I are sitting there stunned. And so we take him. He said,
And you
well,
had no idea who this was. I mean, it just,
no idea who he
wow.
was. But so, we're talking to him. I can't remember his name or anything. And so we let him out at the bus station. So Chris and I are sitting there looking at each other. And then, when we come to our senses, we're like, man, there's some stuff we need to ask him. So we go back to the bus
Are
station.
the Chiefs going to win by 7? Oh, all right. That's what I would be asking.
We go back to the bus station, and of course, no guy. And I swear it had to be an angel.
Bishop, this is one of those things where that I just like. I mean, I there are so many stories where it is just absolutely clear that God has sent someone there for you for a reason. I have one of my best friends in the world. As I like to say, he was cool. He's a white dude with blue eyes and blonde hair, and he left a residency in med school out here to go work at Research Medical Center in the ER. And I'm like, there are not many dudes like that, and even fewer white guys like that. But right. he was amazing, because when Leah was pregnant, my oldest daughter was in her stomach, Dr. Richard Dow could put his hand on her stomach and the baby would move. Then I would put my hand on the stomach and the baby wouldn't move. And I said, if this kid comes out white, it's yours. But Bishop, it was his energy. He was that. And I mean, it was incredible how he had that energy. And so he got sick, he got brain cancer, and I'll never forget, only time I've ever fallen out was when his wife called and said, yeah, Dow has brain cancer, he's going to die. He's going into surgery tomorrow. What? And so it's a long story, just gets in the airport, but it culminates at some level with my youngest brother, who used to be all messed up, picking me up at the airport, handing me like $400 cash and say, I got a rental car, go see Dow, which I say, now that's the fucking miracle that my brother, but I go to see Dow, and it was crazy because he was there and it was crazy and all that. And he had this surgery and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm flying home, and it's the front seat, the seat 1, and you can't put your feet anywhere. And I'm sitting on here. This woman sits next to me here, and there's a seat here. And so we're flying, and I love Dow. He was another one of these people he did it right. I mean, he cared about it. He did everything right, and it bothered me. Yeah. And this lady says to me, you look troubled. And I said, yeah, it's been a rough couple of days. She goes, what happened? So, well, my best friend in the world, I love him, has brain cancer. He's probably going to die. And she looks over and she says, well, not necessarily, because, and she points, she said, see this here? I had brain cancer too.
Really?
And I said, okay, all right. And we start talking, and she says, but even if he does, there's this whole world out there. And she's and I'm going to start crying. She had that feeling, Bishop, where it's like, she's like, it's going to be okay. Everything works out, and I can see things are going to be okay, and he's going to be okay. His family's going to be okay. And you need to know that. Wow. And I'm like, okay, no worries. And then we had a layover in Vegas, and so I said, okay, cool. And we got back on like 40 minutes later. So I'm in the front row. Now she says, it takes me a while to get off. Go ahead and go. So I get off the plane, and I'm walking down the gangplank or whatever that is. And it's just one of those moments where now I have a little more clarity about sometimes God saying, hey, listen, hello. And I said, yeah, this is a big deal. And so I go to the end, and I turn. I'm the first person off the plane. And I'm like, I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to talk. I want to know. That's just so weird. And I sit there, I stand there and stand there and stand there. Never comes off the plane.
Really?
Get back on the plane. not there.
Wow.
It was amazing. And it was,
Yeah.
and what was crazy, Bishop, is it was just for me. It was God saying, it's going to be okay. Well, it was
Wow.
just never got off the plane.
Yeah, that is incredible. Hey, Doc, you just you can't explain God. God works. Here's one of my favorite statements: God works in mysterious ways, but God is not
Yeah,
mysterious.
that's different than how I say it. But you know what's funny though, Bishop? But that it's one of those things that I think that if more people would understand that that God does, I mean, He really does. He really does. And you could call it all, and again, I think God is God, and you can call him whatever you want. He's still just God. If
Yeah.
people understood that, wait, God is he's helping you in ways that you don't even know. I think that would that would help us because that it's weird how he does. I mean, like on that plane, he didn't have to do that for me.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, but why? Who gives a crap? And God takes a second out of his time to
Yeah.
say, yeah, I know this is a bad deal, and just I'm going to go give you some advice.
So Mike, and this is not to embarrass you,
All right.
but but
This is about the time I got drunk in church and got
no,
naked.
no,
Oh, okay, good.
no.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
See, I am a very open-minded, liberal type person, and of course, when I came up in school, as a youngster, you can't curse, you can't say bad words and things of that nature. So when you say the things that you say, sometimes people would write you off and say, he can't believe in God. He's throwing out MFs and this or that and the other. And I think people have to understand that God is a God who is expressive. And you can't put people in your little square or your little triangle and say, if you fit in my square box or my triangle, then you know God. And so, I often remind people that Peter had a switchblade. He would curse you out and cut you, and God still used him. So I believe that we've got to get to a point where we allow individuals to be expressive. Stop trying to judge whether you know God, because you're telling me an account that you had with an angel. So I'm a bishop, I'm a religious guy, I'm a preacher. I've had an account with an angel, but I can't discount your account with the angel because I don't think you fit into my religious box.
But now, Bishop, that's funny because one of the things I wanted to, and this is a topic I work on, is that as I say, I'm a Christian of considerable faith, and then I tag a great joke onto that, which is similar to saying, uh, I'm a pedophile, but I love kids. Is because usually, but you know what I mean. But usually, people that want to tell you how Christian they are and how they're the least. And
Yeah.
when I see people who talk about kids, and then you don't care about children, and so it's funny because here's what I know, and when and I've dealt. You remember on Emmanuel Cleaver's campaign, I was telling young brother Mark here that I met you on Cleaver's campaign when Luther Washington, Emmanuel Cleaver was going to be the first African American mayor of Kansas City, and our campaign manager wasn't particularly fluent with black ministers. And he said, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give you you're going to be in charge of black preachers. And I was like, cool, because I was in law school, number one. I said, good. And two, I may be the only brother in the world who likes ethnic women. So I was like, this is perfect. And so it was, you just, it, it came about in a way where I got to meet a lot of people and see a lot of people. And I met people, some of who are just amazing. And I realized that, man, my commitment to God is it's so deep, and more importantly, it's just I can prove it. I know what God's done for me. I don't need you to tell me anything. And I also
Right.
know what God really wants is he wants you to walk the walk. He doesn't give a shit what you say. So
Yeah.
you people, there are those people telling you this and telling you that. There's a couple minutes. There are people where it's like, you're not that. You're not that. So you can have your little rules. You could be the guy, tell me how much you love kids. That's why you take them to the Boy Scout camp. Or you can
Yeah.
love kids and watch for them and help that kid eat breakfast who didn't ever get to eat breakfast. Being a Christian of considerable faith is about what it is that you do. What it
Yeah.
is that you do. And so
Absolutely.
but it really is, Bishop. And it's so funny where you're just like, you guys can think what you want, but that's what I love about God. He's like, do it. He just, don't talk about it. He just does it.
So Mike, when you said we've known each other 20 years, I was thinking like,
I
it's
think
been longer than
I was
that.
going to say, I was like,
So Emmanuel Cleaver,
Bishop, it's because I'm
Okay.
single and you're married. It's really 8 years I've known you. Don't do that.
Emmanuel Cleaver became mayor in 1991.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
we've known each other since in
Wow.
the 90s. So
Wow.
it's been 30 years or more.
One of my favorite Emmanuel Cleaver stories is that I did my senior internship with him. And this is where my family, we didn't go to church. Although we had a pastor across the street who was Reverend Matthews, who was great. And I remember it was late. It was during budget and it was late. It was probably 6:30. And I remember someone called and Cheryl took the phone in the office and she covered up and she said, Rev, it's for you. And he said, tell him. And he stopped. He stepped out of the door. Tell him I'm not in the office. And I was like, okay, that's a good one. That's a good one, Rev. That's strong. That's strong. Bishop, we got to wind this up. We're out of time. Thank you for your friendship and your guidance, and thank you for giving a shit about people. And I know I shouldn't, but